Here's part 2 on the Great Blue Note run in 61. I want to keep the length of these manageable for people. This is Jimmy Smith Midnight Special, number 4078, and it's a treasure. It's back at the Chicken Shack. One of his sermon house party. It's one of his top 5 records, and it's one of his last at Blue Note, and he's probably already signed his contract to go, which had to be devastating for Alfred Lyon, which is also probably a part of why he has his suitcase packed. There's probably a great symbology right there saying, we're gonna miss you, Jimmy. You know, let's have you put a suitcase on and let's have that symbolic departure and state the fact that you're on your way out. Good luck to you. And I'm sure they wish them nothing but the best. You know, they want these guys to be successful, and they can't blame them for taking triple the money at Verve with the backing of the MGM and the studios. How can we fault him? But what are we going to do to survive? That's the question. Stanley Turrentine, Kenny Burrell, and Donald Bailey round this quartet out, and great album cover. And we hear Jimmy here in the pocket. And compared to his early Blue Note stuff, where he's just this wall of thunder, there's some minimalism to him here. There's actually a bit more dynamic scaling to what he's doing here. It breathes, it seethes. This is great stuff. Burrell is the perfect complement because he can be that breathy, melodic structure undertone. He'll give you the chords to fill in, the coloring. Then he can give you some wonderful, clean lines as well to balance what Jimmy's doing. There's Burrell, you know. So this is fantastic. Blue Note royalty. And again, it's a record you can have for $40. So the notion that you need to spend $500 to have a record that's worth showing somebody, it's nonsense. It's complete nonsense. This is Lou Donaldson's second record from 1961, Gravy Train, and we're actually starting to move towards even more of a boogaloo sound here. And this has Herman Foster on the piano, who I used to get confused with Frank Foster for some reason. Herman Foster was a great piano player. He has a record on Argo that's pretty tough to come by. Ben Tucker is on the bass, Alec Dorsey's on the conga, Dave Bailey, and Lou Donaldson. And one thing about the Lou Donaldson conga records, adding that conga gives it that hint of Latin, and it gives it that hint of a spicy salsa verde. It just becomes a little bit more cubano, and gives it a bit more of a laid-back stride. And the conga is very subtle, because you don't need a ton of conga on the Gravy Train. The Gravy Train's goopy, but you can sprinkle some conga on the top, and then it will just float in space like a marshmallow on a plate of hot yams. That conga's just gonna snap, crackle, and pop your way through it. Bailey, Tucker laid down a solid groove, and Donaldson, again, one of the great storytellers. Gravy Train's a great record, another great album cover. So you might be having a hot dog on a New York City street. Man, I look at these men, I just marvel at their dignity, their humanity, their passion, their forgiveness. 4080 is the great Hank Mobley Workout, a record that's oft talked about. It's one of the more expensive records in Blue Note's catalog in terms of original copies. This has Grant, Green, Wynton Kelly, Philly Joe Jones and Paul Chambers. And again, Mobley is very much influenced by who he's playing with. And having Grant Green, having Philly Joe with that cool swing, having Wynton Kelly with the solid rhythm and blues take on the piano groove, it creates a minimalist, very bluesy, soulful record that's far from his hard bop affairs. Just a lovely, light swing. It's not a heavy Blakey swing. It's a light swing. Philly Jones is just flicking stars. Just flicking. And the group is just laying down pastels. Kelly and Green are just great together. And it's fun to hear Hank in this format. There's Grant. Love that tone. There's Wynton. All of them are just floating on that light swing of Philly Joe Jones and Paul Chambers. One of the true stars of 61. And what's incredible about this whole string of stuff is how much of it is classic. The Blue Note discography is just such royalty. And until you see a year like 61 laid out, record after record after record, there's not a ton of records you've never heard of. There's not a ton of artists. I don't even know who that is. For the most part, most of us know these names. Most of us even can tell what most of these guys played. Most people know Grant Green played guitar. Most people know Jimmy Smith was an organ player. Most people know Stanley Turrentine played the sax. Like, so these are pretty household names in a second-tier jazz sense. They're not that first tier of names that a non-jazz person knows. They know Miles Davis, maybe John Coltrane. They probably heard Thelonious Monk, because how do you forget that name? You know, Louis Armstrong's name kind of rings out, even if you don't know or have it. But these names are a bit more that next tier. Once you actually dive into jazz, you start collecting and buying it, and you get past having Sketches of Spain, Kinda Blue, and My Favorite Things, where do you turn next? And Blue Note, of course, with the great exposure it gets today, is right there for most collectors to jump into. A lot of it's available in print and has been throughout the decades, so it's out there to be had. Turrentine's a great player, as I mentioned before. This is dearly beloved 4081. It's actually one of the ones you see less. It's a cool cover, beautiful Blue Note logo, you know, the Reed Miles layout. It's not a record you see a ton like you do see some of Turrentine's records. Up and Down Horace Parlan. One of Parlan's most interesting records is this one, because he adds Booker Irvin to the mix. He has played with Booker on a couple other sessions. I believe he played on a couple of Booker records as well. Maybe that one with Don Patterson too, if I recall. But Parlan's a very creative, very interesting player, a fine composer. Booker Irvin is a Texas tenorman with a lot of, you know, the Arnett Cobb, Illinois Jackette sound, but he's also got a lot of that Coltrane, Sonny Rollins tone. Big, full, hearty, masculine, bravado. He's not shy about giving you the full force of the saxophone. And then Grant Green, George Tucker, and Al Harewood round this out with a nice river of rhythm again. That river of rhythm. And it's just a fantastic record. Great cover. A nice use of the color pink, or fuchsia if you will. 4082. Another classic Blue Note title. This is a Classic Records reissue. Carline records, I don't think sold super well and are pretty tough to come by. Another Dexter record is Dexter's Calling. Another incredible album cover. The bands of color to me are so classic Reed Miles. Dexter here is playing with Kenny Drew, Paul Chambers, and is it Philly Joe Jones? I think it is. It is. He's going to depart for Europe eventually, or pretty soon. I think it's 63. But he plays with Europeans on those sessions, even on Blue Note. But he's still playing with pretty much American guys here. Kenny Drew actually ends up in Europe with him as well. What can you say about this? It's the blues, it's gospel, it's a salvation that heals. And again, that's Dexter's redemption. A guy that just spent years in the penitentiary, getting to play blues again with the top sideman on one of the top indie jazz labels, he didn't take that opportunity for granted. He makes the best of it, and these Blue Note records he makes are all great places for someone who wants a little bit deeper knowledge of jazz, but doesn't want to be scared away by anything either. Dexter's Blue Notes are all great. They'll all have a couple blues, they'll all have a ballad, maybe two, and maybe an up-tempo number or two. They're always going to teach you how jazz sounds. How this guy is telling you something from his soul that he just needs to get it off his chest. Like, the message is right there. As codified as jazz is, which allows it to exist still today and speak the words it's saying, sometimes the code is so at the surface that you can tangibly peel it off and get exactly where a guy's coming from. This is another great Babyface Willette record. This is going to be his last at Blue Note. Grant Green and Ben Dixon. Another trio session. Like I said, he's been doing some side work at Blue Note throughout this period. Great Reed Miles album cover once again. Stop and listen. He's playing that nice left-hand pattern and then punctuating with his right. And Grant's is laying that chord down. That's it. I mean, that's the blues. That's the gospel as it comes straight to you. You know? Moving along, 4085, Ready for Freddie. Again, Hubbard. Is on the edge of the Blue Note sound. Hubbard has a fairly big license to be creative, innovative. He doesn't reinvent the wheel, but he's certainly willing to tackle difficult composition, tackle interesting lineups, play breakneck tempos. This is with Wayne Shorter, Bernard McKinney, McCoy Tyner, Art Davis, and Elvin Jones. And this record is a slight departure for Hubbard and Blue Note. It's not out, but it has moments. You add Shorter to the mix, you're going to have some interesting things happening. And Bernard McKinney plays the euphonium, which is the same as a baritone between a tuba and it's a valve, pretty big horn. It's a pretty brilliant session. McCoy Tyner is also on this, which gives it another bright, young talent. So you have a lot of young, brilliant minds with Hubbard, Tyner, and Shorter, plus a great rhythm section. So great Hubbard. One of the tougher ones to find, I think. Probably in part because Shorter's on it. And Shorter's starting to become like Mobley, where if he's on your session, it's going to make it difficult to find. An interesting record here from Grant Green is Grandstand, which I believe is his third record in terms of being actually released. And this this has Jack McDuff, who's pretty much a prestige guy, and Yusef Lateef, who's also pretty much a prestige guy at this point, along with Al Harewood. And you don't hear Yusef Lateef at Blue Note very much at all. It's a pretty rare thing. And he plays the tenor and the flute here. Grandstand's a long title track that kicks off side 2. But listen how moody that is. You could be back in Detroit. A dirty rain's falling. The Detroit River's in the background. Cobb Center. The grit of the manufacturing hub of the nation. And all that gritty manufacturing, all that pollution in the river, it's why the black community's there like it is. For work. The shitty jobs that the rich white kids no longer want to work. These black men migrate there in the tens of thousands in the 20th century. And it gives Detroit this incredible talent base. Wonderful album cover again. Yusef actually plays a pretty big role on that record, and it's almost like he could have been the leader on this, but he was probably under contract elsewhere, and so that didn't happen. Leo Parker is a name that most people aren't that familiar with. He's one of the most obscure guys in this run of Blue Notes. Number 4087. He makes 2 records here in quick succession and then kind of moves along. He comes from that same Illinois Jack Cat, big bluesy tenor, baritone sound, that just baked beans and prostitutes, and it's a good time being had. You know what I mean? This is celebration music. Johnny Burks is on the trumpet, Bill Swindell on the tenor, Leo Parker on the baritone, Yusef Salim is on the piano, Stan Conover and Pernell Rice. So pretty much the entire session is not standard Blue Note players. Cover photos by Frank Wolf, recorded by Louis Van Gelder. So it looks like he brings his whole group up with him. DC area guys. It's a fine record, and it swings with a bit of that southern grits and gravy sound. And you gotta love a baritone sax whenever you have the chance to. You know, we don't get enough baritone. Fuck cowbell. I want baritone. Another great free sound session here. Here We Come. And it's one of the great album covers. It's them in a fantastic car. And you can't even tell what that is. Looks like they're on the east side of the park, maybe. Cruising down the New York avenues. I've said a lot about the 3 sounds. I don't need to dive into it too much right here. But the 3 sounds deserve a little bit more recognition from people. Fickle Sonnets, another great Jackie McLean session. This is with Tommy Turrentine. Sonny Clark shows up on this. And Sonny Clark had departed in '60. He does some records on Time, that new startup label. He comes back to Blue Note here, and he's making a few more sessions again. And I get the feeling Jackie was excited to have Sonny Clark on this session. Butch Warren, Billy Higgins, and Tommy Turrentine wrap it up. Cool album cover. You can see the intensity of Sonny Clark there on the back. Tommy should have gotten more records as a leader. And as many side sessions as he's on at Blue Note, how he didn't get a record as a leader is a bit of a puzzle to me. But Stanley sure got a lot. And I couldn't tell you where Tommy Turrentine was under contract. I know he has a couple records at Time. Maybe I think just one, honestly. But if Turrentine's under contract somewhere else. It's none of the big labels. It's not Riverside. It's not Prestige. It's not Impulse. It's not Atlantic. It's not Savoy or Bethlehem. Mosaic. Probably the most thundering record on 1961 Blue Note is Mosaic. As we saw at Impulse, they had brought Curtis Fuller into the group, so it's now a sextet. And Hubbard, Fuller, Shorter, Cedar Walton, Jamie Merritt, are Blakey. Only a guy. Hubbard, hear what he just said? Hubbard, he's not human. The power of this group, adding that full tone of Fuller in there with the sharp edges of Shorter, with the fire and viscosity of Hubbard, with the thunder of Blakey, and then you add Walton and Merritt laying down the piano and the bass. It's just a furious record. That's it. That's the joy of this music, man. It just thunders out of those speakers, rolls into your heart and your soul, and says, in spite of all this shit, let's have a good time. Fuck y'all. That's what attracts me to jazz the most. It's not sitting around feeling suicidal, whining and moping, feeling sorry for itself. And believe me, they would have reason to. And so much of the white music I grew up listening to is just that. It's feeling sorry for itself. It's angsty and mad but doesn't really know why. It's kind of pathetic. Listening to the oppressor, who lives in luxury compared to most of the world, sit around moping. Woe is me. I don't have as much as the guy on the hilltop. It's not fair. I don't want to have to work. The pathetic moping of the ruling class is nauseating. The suicide that's being done by the elite, by the rich, I guess maybe your guilt got to you. But aside from that, I have a hard time understanding it. It's the celebration of these guys. The overcoming nature of this music. That's the power. That's what attracts me to it. That's what is the light. I'm like, in spite of all the shit, I'm not going to bitch and moan. My life is too short and too precious to sit around wallowing in my sea of negativity because I don't have it as good as some people do. And I should, damn it. Don't they know who I am? Fuck yourself. These guys have such difficult roles they're born into, and yet they find this overcoming nature that's powerful. Leapin' and Lopin' is Clark's return to Blue Note. He passes shortly after this, which is devastating. He's one of the true important guys at Blue Note. I've talked about him quite a lot. He's a real shaper of the 57, 58, 59 Blue Note sound. Hard bop is synonymous with him as much as Art Blakey. He just really is a furious, driven, socially, politically conscious voice that when he's in any session, he gives it an edge, a charged, driven sound. And he just is that guy who can be single-handedly leading a session. Tommy Turrentine, the great Charlie Rouse, who makes a rare Blue Note appearance and makes his one record coming up next year. Butch Warren and Billy Higgins. Tommy again's given lots of room here to shine, and Clark's laying back in the cut, just laying down little chunks and pockets of feel and little sounds of groove. 4091, the great Sonny Clark. 4092 is one of the rarest, most unpublicized, least shared Blue Notes in the discography. It's the great Kenny Clark with his friend Frosty Bolon, who either French or Belgian. Jean-Michel can tell me for sure. Frosty Bolon is, I believe, a piano player. I'll have to double check. This is a Japanese pressing. Dusko Gojkovic is on the trumpet, Raymond Draws on the alto, Chris Kellen's on the baritone, Francie Boll on piano, Jimmy Wood is on the bass, who makes a great record at Argo that's really tough to find. Carl Drevo's on the tenor. So most of the band's made up of Europeans, with Kenny Clark and Jimmy Wood running up the bass and the drums. And that's one of the things about rhythm sections. A lot of white mixed groups, the brothers play the bass and the drums to lay down that river, and the white guys have a great time emulating over top of that because it's easy. This was recorded in Europe, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, recorded by Wolfgang Hirschman, produced by Gigi Gampi, May 18th and 19th in Cologne, Germany. So it's one of the rare Blue Note albums that's not Rudy Van Gelder. It's not recorded in America. But Kenny Clark is so worthy of being remembered. Clark's one of the true great innovators in this music. I've talked about him a lot. And it's a tough piece to find. Again, Japanese copy. The Japanese have pretty much issued all things Blue Note. 4093 is one of my favorite Blue Notes of all time. And I've talked to you about how accessible something is. And as much as I love Jackie McLean and even Freddie Hubbard, it's more my personal listening space. I love Hubbard, but Hubbard's a lot. I wouldn't play him in the restaurant very often because horns are piercing. The range they come in kind of counters the human voice. So people have to kind of talk over the horn, which is rather difficult, which is part of why guitars and piano are great for the bar setting. But Ike Quebec is the one horn player I played quite a lot because he's soft, he's melodic. There's a lot of Ben Webster in that. A guy that had quite a career in the 7-inch formula for Blue Note in the early 50s, kind of goes into a mid-decade disappearing act. He is doing A&R work for Blue Note, and he convinces the label to give him another chance to record. This is his comeback record, 4093. The great Freddie Roach is on the organ, one of his first Blue Note appearances. Al Harewood's on the drums. Milt Hinton is on the bass. And you don't see Milt at Blue Note very often either. But I'm guessing Milt and Ike probably went back. Older generation guys. You don't have to be much of a jazz fan to love this. Milt's doing his thing. The light, breathy Ike Quebec. That's, to me, jazz that even the simplest beginner would get it, would love it. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are looking for exactly this. And they're going through Coltrane's discography looking for it, and you're not going to find it there. You can dig through all that avant-garde stuff and not find the sound that is codified as that smooth, fun jazz that people love to listen to. This is the great Fred Jackson, a guy that's kind of rooted in R&B, kind of crossover jazz. This is one record at Blue Note. He does some side work as well. Again, he's got kind of his own band here, if I recall. Fred Jackson, Earl Van Dyke, Willie Jones, and Wilbert Hogan. I can't remember where he's from. I think he's got a southern roots to him. And he plays very much a soulful, bluesy driven R&B jazz. And he fits very well with the Blue Note sound. And why he didn't get more dates at Blue Note I'm not sure. But it's a great record. It's kind of tough to come by. 4094. And that leaves us with one more record to cover here. 4095. The other Leo Parker record. And this is the only record in this stretch in 61 that was scheduled for release and then got pulled back. This wasn't issued until later. I think this one comes out in 1980. Yeah, released in 1980. A great session, again with that same group. Dave Burns on the trumpet here as well. He's a great trumpet player. That's that great baritone sax sound. It's such a great, rich tone. I love the timbre of the baritone sax. It's got a heft to it, a grit to it. It just always sounds fun. It's a party if there's a baritone sax. It's funny how different Jerry Mulligan, who was very much a compositional driven guy. And Mulligan, he has an elegant approach to the baritone. And most of the other guys have more of a honking, blurting, kind of fun party vibe. And Mulligan's over there creating the birth of the cool. Rolling with Leo, 4095. It was given the number that it was intended to have when it came out. I think it initially had a shittier cover in 80. And this is the Japanese giving it a better Blue Note kind of cover. But great stuff. And that wraps up 1961 and the Blue Note catalog. My dog's talking to me. My kids are annoying me. I gotta take a dump. So I'm gonna wrap this episode up right here.
Wow.
Blue Note, 61. What an incredible run. And we can see how different it is from the wide spray of what Impulse was doing. You all be safe. Peace.
Wow.
Why the fuck you gotta annoy me on my episode?
I literally have only done one thing. No, I was just looking for a slight motion saying yes.